It's like they built it right through the, almost in the tunnel.
Yeah.
Under like sky bridges. So it's kind of cool.
Good evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm excited to have you all here. I'm very excited to welcome Patrick Stone from the Maricopa Association of Governments. They are essentially the compass of the Phoenix area, or since they are much bigger, you could say we're the MAG of the Treasure Valley, because they are a much bigger area. But he is here tonight to talk about planning and funding our plans. You have a plan? Now what? Just a little bit about tonight's presentation. Like with the Treasure Valley, the Valley of the Sun, the Phoenix area, is growing very rapidly and has the transportation issues, just like we do, that come with that rapid growth. Tonight, Patrick is going to discuss how they're working to fund transportation improvements to meet the demands of those growth, and particularly share Phoenix's journey through its 1 cent sales tax, or excuse me, 1.5 cent sales tax for transportation, and the impacts that that has made on the transportation system, both large and small. We'll also share Phoenix's successes, challenges, and lessons learned that we can then apply here in the Treasure Valley. Patrick has over 35 years of experience in transportation and transportation finance, most of that with the Arizona Department of Transportation, and then he has been at MAG, the Maricopa Association of Governments, for the last 5 years. And he and his team are responsible for all facets of transportation budgeting for their region. So as you can imagine, that is no small feat. You can learn more about Patrick, and I know several of you already did, by picking up the bio on the table by the door. Couple of housekeeping items. Refreshments, as always, in the back. Please help yourself at any time. Restrooms are out the back to your right and on your right. We will be sharing Patrick's slides on our website. Most likely get those posted next week. And also sharing a video of tonight's presentation. That will take a little longer to get posted, but sometime in the next couple of weeks. I do encourage you to please fill out your evaluation form when we're finished and leave it in the basket in the back. And I think everyone signed in as you arrived, but if you did not, if you could please sign in before you leave. It just helps us track our attendance, so appreciate that. Finally, if you haven't already, please silence your cell phone and join me in welcoming Patrick Stone.
Sure, my cell phone was silenced. Thank you all. Happy to be here. A couple of my housekeeping items. I have a slide deck. I will go through my slide deck. I will go off my slide deck. I will go into some random spaces, so don't think you're missing something. If you see a slide that is of interest, stop me. We can talk about it in depth. I have no qualms with kind of pausing or adjusting. I appreciate it. Met with Amy and Austin today at lunch. Helped me kind of think about how to contextualize what we have at MAG and make it hopefully something applicable to this region. As you noted, we are significantly bigger. So tonight, a couple things. Why we have a plan, how we built the plan, policy and funding dollars to action, next steps. So wanted to do a little bit of a side-by-side comparison of MAG and Compass. So right now, our region, 5.2 million people. And if any of these numbers for Compass are wrong, Amy, just correct me. I did the best I could. 856,000 in this region. So our region size, we are 10,600 square miles. If we were a state, we'd be the 44th largest state in the country. So the Treasure Valley area, a little bit smaller, like about a tenth of the size. And we kind of have, this was, I thought, interesting. We have a kind of a similar evolution path of when we became an MPO, how we were established. But yeah, so just to get kind of the context, because when I go into some of my slides, I was very conscientious about this. I didn't want to make this look like it's some sort of MAG flex presentation of like, look at what we have. Oh, we are so wonderful. It is not that. We have a lot of challenges ourselves, but just to kind of give some context, so when you see some numbers, you're not like, wow, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So why we have a plan? I love these slides. I've used these slides a few times. So I'm a native Phoenician. So I grew up in the Valley of the Sun. In 1986, I was about a wee lad of 16, just starting to drive. That was our freeway network. That is what the Valley of the Sun looked like. We had Interstate 17, Interstate 10, and the one going off to the right is US 60. The one thing you'll note, Interstate 10, west of that, stopped. It was the last section of interstate, it was the last section of the interstate not built. It actually, if you wanted to go to California from Phoenix, if you guys want to come in, I just started. We can go right back a slide, get you up to speed. But it was really interesting at this point in time. My wife, we met back in the 80s. I lived in the Southeast Valley, so in the southeast part of the map. She lived in the north part of the map. To get to see each other on the weekend would take an hour. There was no freeway, so needless to say, this is where we started from, and I'll talk about what the journey looked like. And the reason we use pre-1986, that's when we first introduced the half-cent sales tax in the Valley of the Sun for funding transportation investments. And so what did we do? We taxed ourselves. We said, hey, we need to build out these freeways. We have no connectivity in the region. And so that half-cent sales tax that we did in the mid-80s built what we call the loop system. So this is our freeway network circa 2005. And what you really see is a lot in the East Valley, some in the West Valley, but most of the concentration for us was in our East Valley. But tremendous investment. I think it was a success. One thing that's always interesting, the inset map, you see at the top, apologies, it's a little small. We pretty much built the plan we told the voters we were going to build, but for a couple of extensions, we had a northwest extension that was not built, and then we had, and we'll talk about this, in the Southwest Valley, we had a loop there that didn't get built just because of funding constraints, but that's what our network looked like after the first half-cent sales tax. So in the mid-2000s and in 2004, we went back to the voters and said, hey, we did really well, but we're not done. What do you think about funding the sales tax for an additional 20 years? And they said yes. And so what we did with that is we built out additional capacity into the network. What you really see is you see that southwest loop got built, that northwest loop got built, and those lines you kind of see in the center, we introduced high capacity transit into the region as part of that. And that's what's really interesting about that sales tax. It's called Proposition 400, just ended last year. We went from a freeway focus to a multimodal focus. So we allocated some of the funding to freeways, some to our arterial roadway network, and then some into transit. So, and it was, yeah, question. So,
what was the population back in '86 when you were starting? Was it 10?
It's like a couple million.
Couple million.
Yeah, it was
Approximately.
Yeah, because the population is 5.2 million, it was so much lower. Even though we didn't have the freeways, the traffic didn't feel the same. So you didn't have this connectivity that you now have, but I would argue it didn't feel like it was as difficult to get. But also, the build out was very concentrated into the center, so we didn't see as much growth in the northwest and southeast valleys. Oh, good question. And then fast forward now, and this is where we're at today. So Proposition 479, Prop 479, you'll hear me talk about it numerous ways. This was the extension for another 20 years of the half-cent sales tax. So everything in orange is associated with this next extension. The one thing that's interesting, that road that goes left to right under Interstate 10, that's the last new freeway we're going to build in the valley. It's called State Route 30, and that's going to be the last new freeway construction we do. The rest of the funding in the plan is about system optimization, corridor optimization, but less about building out raw capacity. There's just not room, space, or as we will talk later, funding to do that. So that's really what we're doing there, is building up. Yes, sir.
In any of your thought process, were toll roads brought up?
Oh, toll roads. Boy, if you want to get people excited in Phoenix, talk about toll roads. Or the other concepts, they call them managed lanes, which is a California concept. It's a challenge because the feds have restrictions on tolling interstates. You can't toll a road that was already paid for with federal funding, unless you're adding capacity. The political will in the valley has been very hesitant to ever look at that because there's the perception of double taxation. Well, my taxes paid for the road, why are you going to charge me again to use them? They've talked about it occasionally, and we'll talk about one project. One of the last projects we've completed under Proposition 400. Has anyone ever been to Phoenix? Oh, this is gonna be awesome. Okay. If you go Interstate 10 and you head east out of the valley and you're going south, there's a big curve. We call it the Broadway curve. Congested like nothing else. We did an urban reconstruction project, largest project we've done to date. Added a collector distributor system. They're called CD roads. They're like local roads that take off traffic, and you avoid a lot of conflicts. And when we did that project, when we were originally going to do that widening, they were like, oh, why don't we add managed lanes? Why don't we add toll lanes? And just no one wanted it. In fact, actually, it's interesting. It's the only freeway in the valley that has dual high occupancy vehicle lanes. We have dual HOV lanes there. And even then, people are like, why are there two HOV lanes? We don't want. You guys don't have HOV lanes here, do you?
Nearest one is Ogden, and it's very, very, very short.
We have a lot of HOV lanes in our system. You'll see, even when we get into well, it's on the screen there. Part of the plan is 86 miles of new HOV lanes. So that's one of the strategies our region used to combat congestion was to develop using the high occupancy vehicle lanes.
Are they full?
Yes. This is a good one. So, for a period of time, our HOV lanes could be used by EV vehicles at any time of the day, regardless of the number of passengers in the car. The feds put a kibosh on that and said, no, that's not what we expected, you can't do that. But up until September of last year, an EV with one person could use an HOV lane. So it really had added a lot of congestion into those lanes.
Or inflatable partners.
I sure hope people aren't doing that. And we have a very aggressive, the fine is over $400 if you're caught in the HOV lane and you only have one person. So, any other questions on just the build out of the system?
I got one quick
Yeah,
one.
of course, Austin.
The orange, I think, square, what is that? They're on I-17 just north of downtown?
Oh, yeah, so that, so some of those orange that you see are high capacity transit. And that is what would be known as the West Phoenix high capacity transit line, but they didn't know where the alignment would be, so they put a square.
Oh.
They had 3 different roadways. They're like, it could be on this, could be on that, and it could be on this, but we don't know yet enough to say which route.
Okay.
So when they went to the voters, they said, we envision something.
Somewhere in that area.
Somewhere in that general area, we're gonna do a thing. It was a little more descriptive than that, but that's kind of where we went. So why we built a plan and kind of where we wanted to go with this, and you'll see a couple other slides, based on our land use growth and where our valley was growing, we figured out that doing the plan we envisioned would provide access to even more developable land. So you can see where the 479 improvements are versus where you have developable sites. And really, given the build out in the valley, we look southeast and northwest. And the reason some people may, why don't you build south? Why don't you build? So Arizona is second in the country only to Nevada in the number of federal lands in our state, and a lot of them are federally recognized tribal lands. So within our geography, we have a lot of tribal communities that have land that you really can't access. So what does MAG do? Similar to Compass, we're the federally designated MPO or Metropolitan Planning Organization. We're also a Council of Governments, and we're also a transportation management area. We do everything because we're over 200,000 in population. So really, 2 key areas, if you think about, is we do transportation planning, which is the vision side, and we do the programming, which is taking the vision into action. And so I'm going to kind of go over both of them tonight, hopefully give you some flavor for what we do. And for us, it coalesces in 2 different things. We have a regional transportation plan. Ours is called Momentum 2050. Compass has, what is it called again? I'm going to mess it up, so I don't want to.
Just by Communities in Motion 2050.
Communities in Motion. So very similar to what ours is called Momentum. And then the interesting thing that we'll talk about tonight, and I don't think this is something Compass has, we actually have a specific investment plan to our portfolio, to what we do. And I'll talk about why we have one. So how do we build this plan? So I think this is a really interesting graph. There's a group in Phoenix called the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, or GPEC. They analyzed where did all of new development build. Where are people investing? And what we saw time and time again is they build along existing planned or future high-capacity transportation investments. So we see along the loop system, along I-10, on the west side, but that's where we see the development going. So it kind of makes sense if you have a strong transportation network, you encourage and drive investment and development in the region. And that's what we did. And we'll, in fact, talk about, there's a dot just north of that 17. That is TSMC, which is the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. So similar to Micron here in the Treasure Valley area, TSMC came in from Taiwan, $160 billion investment into our region. And one of the reasons they did that is they said we have access to freeways, have access to transportation. They had access to the folks that were the jobs they were gonna create. So that was an important part of our story. Yeah.
On that previous slide, do you see similar investment along high-capacity transit?
Yes, you do. So it's interesting because there was a lot of question about high-capacity transit and what it would do. And I don't ride, I drive along the high-capacity transit corridor. A lot of infill development and a lot of vertical development. So we're seeing a bunch of mixed use, a lot of infill urban living, and it's right along those corridors. And so, yeah, you see it there as well. It's not just freeways only. Good point.
But it's more residential, you're saying?
Yeah, well, if you think about where our current light rail goes, and this map's not easy to see, it goes along Central Avenue, which is kind of like our main street, goes a little bit into the Northwest Valley, and then goes out into Mesa, into the Southeast Valley. It's along a lot of built areas already, so it's not like you can bring heavy industrial in, or you can bring something. It's just not connected to that. But no, good question. So what did we, and this is when we went out to our voters and said, what would the plan do for you? And everything I talked about is compared to a 2050 no bill. So if we did nothing, and we just said, let the tax expire, we wouldn't be bankrupt, we'd still have some funds, but we wouldn't have the sales tax. But we'd have 31,000 net new jobs every year, 68% fewer road segments with a failing level of service, more amenities within a reasonable drive, to your point, Amy, a lot more access to high capacity transit, and then cutting our afternoon average commute by a third, which for our residents is interesting. We talked about at lunch. Understanding the dynamics here, it was very interesting. It's a very east-west lateral movement, kind of linear. Ours is very much a spoke system. So we have a central hub, and then we have people coming from all different directions. So we don't have a singular commute pattern where we're like, oh, it really comes from one direction in, and then at the night it goes out. From Central Phoenix, not so bad post-COVID, but they flee to all directions. And so you can't just say, oh, well, if we fix the freeway to the west, we'll help that. Well, they go east as well. But that was a big part. And one thing that and I think I have a slide for it, I hope I do. If not, I'll talk about it. Oh yeah, here it is. So when we talk about commute, we sold it to our residents, and it's a true statement. Compared to our peers, we have the best commute in the nation. To peers, not to everyone, to our peers, which are similar urban size. So what we do is we have a travel time index, which rates how reliable and efficient your commute is and how much time you waste in your car in traffic, and ours is still the best. And we said the reason we can keep it that way is if we invest in the plan, we'll still maintain that competitive advantage. We use these when when others talk to employers looking to invest in the region. It's one of the things they talk about is you have a reliable transportation system folks can get around. Always interesting. So as in our role, we cannot advocate, we cannot lobby, we do not say go vote for it when the plan was out. In fact, we were very cognizant of not doing that. But we could gauge the public support, and so when we were out, we did find that we had a very overwhelming opinion of folks that were comfortable supporting an extension. And you see this, and it says tax increase. When we originally were doing this plan, we floated the concept of not only extending, but going from a half cent to a full cent. That wasn't as popular, and we'll talk about why that wasn't so popular. But we did still have some fairly robust support from the public of, hey, that would be okay. And the one thing we saw, and you see this everywhere, there are just folks who do not like taxes. Doesn't matter what it's for, how long, how much. We're not for it. Yes, sir.
The tax comes from?
It is a half-cent sales tax.
Thank
So
you.
and we'll talk about, I can go into a little more detail of what the sales tax
You know,
is.
I've seen some before where it was like based on another area, and you think about all the people that are passing through, like me, going to visit my sister in Queen Creek, and I would not be contributing to that. But if it's sales tax and I go buy a cup of coffee or something, I'm paying my way.
Yeah, some do like improvement district taxes and other things, or like hotel taxes or various things. Ours is strictly it's a transaction privilege tax. So retail sales and things of that nature. When we went out to the public, one thing we talked about is, what do you want to see? What do you envision the next iteration of the plan was? And I think this was helpful because we started with the first plan, build the freeways. They were overwhelmed, just build the freeways. The next one, they're like, well, we still want to see freeways, but we still want some other things. We want more. And so we really wanted to kind of highlight to folks, hey, what would you want to see? I think a lot of it, again, just improving capacity, expanding capacity, a lot for transit, support for expanding our light rail system. One thing we're doing in our region now that'll be new is what's called bus rapid transit. We're getting ready to kick that off pretty quick here, so we'll talk about that. But so we heard overwhelmingly, we wanted to still have a multimodal plan. Interesting, 80% of respondents said at least one type of transit improvement's a priority. And we have a real, I won't say it's a perception issue, but it's an implied perception issue. Some folks will tell you transit, no one rides it, it has no value, but then we do these kinds of studies, folks are like, we're in support of it, recognizing that for the people who use it, we have a lot of households in our region with 0 or 1 car. So their only access is through transit, so yeah, sir.
So west of the Mississippi, everything's spread out, 2-car garage, picket fence, room for a horse, which is not conducive to public transit. Are you butting heads with that kind of a mentality?
I wouldn't say it's the mentality of that. I mean, we do have a lot of our residents who, we know where our economically disadvantaged communities are, folks who may not have access to vehicles. And yeah, we do get some of that just because, I mean, you saw the size of our valley's huge. Our region has grown so big that some people, it would be difficult to make transit work for them at this point in time. So they're like, it has no, but even those folks, by and large, you see 80%, even if they're like, I will never take it, I see the value in it. I mean, I was a transit rider for a period of time, and then once I didn't need to be, I was not, just because of time constraints. But yeah, people, you really did see the understanding of the value it provided. Kind of just some snippets of conversations we heard from folks, what they saw in the plan, what was important to them. I think the thing we've noted is even when we go out and talk to folks, and I did way more presentations than I can count, engaging the public about the plan, what it would mean, what it would do. And by and large, everyone got it. They get transportation, I think, because it's so tangible to them, excuse me. But you see here just some snippets of like, hey, I've lived somewhere where it's bad, I get why we need it. The one I thought was interesting in the upper right, consistency is key. That's one thing we've talked about with our system is building it. We talk about travel time reliability. How predictable is your commute? It's not how good it is, but how consistent is your commute. And that has been something that it's the funniest thing, but as long as you can tell them, it may be 25 minutes, but it'll be 25 minutes every day, they're okay with that because they can plan around it. But it's 10 minutes this day, it's 40 minutes that day. That's when people would get very frustrated. So I think we've tried to build a very reliable system in our region. So we did a lot of public participation. As I said, I went out to a lot of community events, sat down at coffee shops with folks, talked to all sorts of individuals, just getting their feedback, what they saw, talking about what we thought the plan would be. We had 34,000 visitors to the website, 818 comments. One thing that was interesting was we had a lot of live chat available for folks. So if they had questions, they could actually ask and get the answer in either English or Spanish. And then we had 500 attendees at different presentations and virtual events. So how did we build the plan? I think this is interesting because we had some conversations at lunch about, and we'll talk about this, and maybe we'll pause here. So MAG, we are 32 member agencies. We are 27 cities and towns. We are 3 Native nations, and we are 2 counties. Our regional council is made up of a representative from all 32 of those agencies. And so when we got to, it was about 2019, we knew the end of the current proposition was not too far away. And I think folks who understand transportation know it takes a while to get things going. And so our elected officials said, you know what we need to do? We need to figure out what everyone wants. And so we went out to all of our member agencies, all 32, and we said, hey, give us any thought you have, any transportation thought, any project you have. We've received 1,500 project submissions. And so that's what starts that bubble exercise on the left. We got those 1,500 submissions, started categorizing them, determining where they went, they did project screening, identifying what, hey, this is this kind of a project. Should it be a regional priority? Should it be something the region funds, or is this really a local priority? And then we kind of went through this whole evaluative process. We scored all the projects, went back to our member agencies and said, here's how it shakes out. Do you want to maybe prioritize your projects? Does this make sense? And then eventually we started building a lot of scenarios and trade-off analysis. So we what if we did a 0.5-cent sales tax and we'll talk about why it was originally for 25 years. It is not, it's 20. We'll get to that. Good story there. It's a teaser. But we talked about system optimization. So in other words, enhancing the existing, building out system capacity. And we looked at the different scenarios and evaluated the projects in the scenarios and went back to our elected officials and said, of these 4 options, there was 4 options, which do you like? And they landed on a plan, and that became the basis of the plan. So from 1,500 projects, we eventually whittled it down to the projects that are actually in the plan. One thing is interesting, before I came up here to Idaho, Friday before I left, we had the groundbreaking for the first new project under 479. It was funny, we had the groundbreaking, but the contractor's already out there, but still on time of peak hour, because the governor was there, we had to get elected officials, so yeah, the contractor's already started, they're turning dirt, but they had the groundbreaking. And the one thing that was interesting, Mayor Gallego, who's the mayor of Phoenix, and some other elected officials, it's interesting, our regional council chair, Mayor Emercio, is from a city called El Mirage, small city, very small. And yet then we also have the mayor of the city of Phoenix, the 6th largest city in the country. And the one thing they all talked about is we knew going into this, we wouldn't get everything. We're just not. We're not going to win. We're not going to get every project we want, but we're going to be able to find value and get something. We're going to get things that we need. And I think that's how it evolved, is they knew they had to give up some things. You can't hold out and say, I want everything from my city. And it worked out well. Our plan that we eventually got to unanimously approved. So all 32 elected officials said yes to that plan before we eventually took it further. Any questions on the performance-based side? So kind of talking about the project scoring, I think this was kind of interesting. This is a great nerd slide if you're really into the technical side. This is cool stuff. This is how we actually evaluated and weighted the projects, because it's very challenging when you're looking at a roadway project in a very small community versus a roadway project in a very large community. You have to do some normalization so that you're comparing apples to apples. And so that's what they did. Is this I just like this slide. It's a lot of detail on here, but it kind of really goes through how we end up getting the normalized scores so that we can evaluate projects and compare them reasonably against each other.
I guess one quick question on
Yeah.
that. Is that on your website? Because
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I've looked
There's
through a lot of
some.
your guys' stuff. I don't know if I've seen this slide before yet.
So all of these slides, and that's why I was somewhat specific about this. The one thing with these slide decks, these were in presentation sometimes, but these might have been a presentation to one of our policy committees. And so you wouldn't see it as an artifact in and of itself, but the presentation itself contains that. But if you want some, Austin, I can hook you up
Okay.
where that comes from.
Thank you.
Austin, I've got, he's showing these from our drive, so I've got them.
Okay.
But not just the slides, I can actually show him the presentation
Oh.
that's part of the full presentation where you can actually see our data folks talking about, hey, really getting into the, there's about 20 slides that explain this in much more detail.
Okay.
So I kind of synthesized it into the singular slide I thought they captured. Yeah,
Actually,
Amy.
a question back one slide. As you were working through your projects that were submitted, are these projects that ultimately were funded through the plan? Or were they a combination of both funded and unfunded projects?
Yeah, so, and reading your note about how big your plan is in the portfolio of unfunded, way more needs than we could ever fund. I mean, it was a category of tens of billions. So what we did is we took all of the projects that the agency submitted, scored and ranked them, and then went to the agencies and said, hey, you submitted 10 projects. We've done the evaluation process. Here's how your 10 projects rank out. Are you good with that list? There was some tweaking, something like, we still really want this one in, you know how it goes, it's a political theater exercise. But yeah, so really what we ended up funding were mainly those top scoring projects. There's a lot that fell below the line. So yeah, of the 1,500 projects, just I won't say a fraction, but maybe 40, maybe 10%, 15% got funded. I mean, it's just, and the one thing is we didn't constrain, we're like, give us, they would submit projects that are, billions of dollar project. Okay, well, we might not be able to do that. Yeah.
Can you give us an example or two of some of the projects that were requested?
Yeah, because we'll see them. So if you think about, we break our plan into modal components. So we had member agencies requesting freeway projects. Hey, I want a new traffic interchange at this intersection. I want a new freeway. I want this freeway widened. We fund arterial projects, a little different than some of, I think that was the weird thing with the highway district, maintains control of the roadways. Our member jurisdictions, ADOT, the Arizona Department of Transportation maintains the freeways and highways. Our member agencies maintain all other roads, other than the unincorporated county, which is maintained by the counties. So yeah, of the arterials, a member agency might say, hey, we want to widen roadway here from point to point, add a lane in each direction. So those kinds of projects. And even the ones that didn't get recommended for funding were of a similar nature, just we didn't have enough funding. Question. So.
Can you, I'm sorry,
Yep.
I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but can you talk about the weighting a little bit on the next slide? How does, it says apply the selected weight. How is the weight selected?
So they had, there were a lot of meetings about that. So we had evaluation factors of like safety, mobility, and they might say, for a project, we'll give a weight of 20% for safety, 30% for congestion, 10% for air quality. And so they would apply those weights to each of the projects to say, oh, you get a safety score of this, you get a,
Okay,
yeah, so it was like that. And eventually you get a composite score that gets the project final ranking.
thank you.
No, great question. So regional transportation goals. Well, we used to have 4. We now have 6 goals. So as we evaluated the plan, these are the goals we really considered, which were safety, mobility, responsiveness, livability, preservation, prosperity. So these are really kind of the tenets of everything we do. You'll see, I'll get to this in the future. Some of the money in the plan is not put to projects yet. It's sitting in some, for lack of a better term, buckets. But when we do fund those buckets, this is what we use. We're like, how does a proposed usage of that funding agree to our regional transportation plan goals? So the plan development. Okay, so I'm getting a little bit of a timeline. Jump ahead there. So we approved our plan in 2021. It took a couple years to develop. Our regional council unanimously approved it in June of 2021. We said this is at the time, our vision out to 2050. So, we'll stop there.
Strike it.
Yeah, strike everything bills. They're wonderful. Our legislative process in Arizona, we're going to do a little pivot for a moment. We have 15 counties in Arizona. Maricopa County is the largest by far. We have a state statute that says if you are in a county greater than, I believe it says, now it may have been changed to 3 million people, to go to your own voters to ask them to tax themselves, you need to have the legislature's permission. The other 14 counties do not have to do that. They can develop a plan, develop a ballot measure, and go to their voters and ask if they'd like to consider it. Maricopa County cannot. So we have to have legislative approval. Hence, we had House Bill 2685. Representative Carroll from Surprise was a champion of the bill. Got it through the legislature, and it's a lot of work. I don't know about your experience. Once I came to MAG, working for the state, you don't see the legislative process as much. We just do what we do. MAG, a lot more visibility into the legislative process, very interesting in understanding of how plans and how this developed. But Representative Carroll, they got it through the legislature. It was approved. It was approved in, I think it was June. We were like excited. My boss, assistant director, went on vacation to Michigan. Things were good. And then we got news on July 6th, the governor had vetoed the bill. It came out of nowhere. No one knew this was going to come. We had no warning. All we got was he did a one-page memo, posted it, said vetoing the bill. No explanation, just vetoed the bill. Darkest days. We'd spent all this time, and the governor said no. Speculation about why he vetoed the bill, but I don't think it was on the merits of the bill. I think he just had an axe to grind about some other things. Vetoed the bill. So what happened, and we'll get to the next one. If you guys remember back to 2022, obviously we had elections in the fall. For us, our legislature turns over every 2 years. They all are up for re-election. We had a shift in the legislature, probably a little more of conservative bent, and so we knew now it was going to be a different path. We were going to have to talk to a new legislature, get them educated, and we had a new governor. Our governor switched. So Governor Ducey, he was term limited. He knew it. He wasn't up for re-election, so he vetoed the bill, and we had a new governor come in. Again, a strike everything bill. But we did get it done. So again, we had a champion in the legislature. And so what really changes between these two in 2022 and 2023, the original plan and the original bill we were taking through was a 25-year sales tax. So the plan and the tax would have gone to 2050, gets vetoed. So we licked our wounds that fall, got ready, started working with the legislature, and they told us fairly early on, and that's fine, we're not going to support 25 years. It's going to have to be a 20-year bill. And so now we had to pivot our plan to fit a 20-year funding window, not 25. Yeah, good times. So the first bill that came through the legislature was actually vetoed by Governor Hobbs. We supported the veto. It was not a good bill. But then we had another strike everything, Representative Livingston, but we got it through. So the governor signed, and what we call it's called enabling legislation. It allows us to now put a ballot initiative on the ballot. So got it through the legislature. But we will talk about what we had to give up and what we had to change to get to Senate Bill 1102. My favorite section. No, that's the best part. Funding's
Well, just those two words together.
Well, in this context, they kind of go together because there's so much of our funding in the sales tax was predicated by policy decisions that came out of Senate Bill 1102. So it kind of changed our path of how we did things. So under Proposition 400, we had two documents. We had a regional transportation plan, and we had our TIP. Our TIP, your region has a TIP, but we had a TIP. So those were our two documents. All of our funding and our vision and the plan and the goals and objectives resided in the RTP, and then the programming of the projects in the short term was in our TIP. So, typical for most, it reflected all funding sources, not just those controlled by the region. As I mentioned, 400 was embedded into the plan. We had challenges with this plan. It was inconsistent. Honestly, and for me, when I first started it was a bit complex and confusing in that the funding policy and the plan were one and the same, and difficult, I think, for folks to understand. So what we did, to go to 479, we do have a regional transportation plan, but we now developed, full stop. That document that's called the RSTIP, the Regional Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Investment Plan, I've had to say that name thousands of times now. It's a very difficult name to say. We have to call it that because that's what's in the legislation. It says your plan will be known as that. So that's a legislative dictated plan. And then we also have our TIP. And so what we did in this new era is we have decoupled funding from the policy document. So we still have our regional transportation plan, visions, goals, objectives, that long-range vision, but the actual funding component is maintained in a separate document. It's part of the RTP, but it lives by itself, and then we still keep our TIP. And as I know, the reason why it was codified in state statute is part 7 Senate Bill 1102. So the RSTIP, it was also approved along with the regional transportation plan. They went together at the same time in June. It's the basis of the half-cent sales tax extension. And as I noted, it replaces the RTP as the region's funding policy. And the weird thing about this, so this is an important document. It's region's funding policy. It's about 5 pages of text in it. That's it. It's a very small document for you. It's surprisingly small. So revenue sources in our RSTIP. Where does the funding come from for MAG? Well, we really have 5 sources. We have our dedicated half-cent sales tax. We have what's known as the Highway User Revenue Fund. So not knowing how it works up here in Idaho, our region receives a portion of the HERF, as we call it, gas tax. So the state gas tax, vehicle license tax, registration fees, that all goes in that bucket. So we get a portion of that bucket. We also get discretionary funding allocated to our partners at ADA. I will talk about what that means. And then we get formula funding allocated by both the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. Those both come to MAG as well. So I just gave this presentation last month. So talk about the revenues. How big is our plan? So when we built the plan in 2020, we did it in what's called constant dollars. We applied inflation to the plan, or we deflated the plan to constant dollars. $28.2 billion, that was the size of the plan. Once Senate Bill 1102 was passed, and we went to the voters in November of 2024 and that passed, I went back to our policy committees in January of 2025 and said, now that we have certainty, we can put things in year of expenditure. What will it cost in the year we actually do it? Went up a bit. So in YOE, it's 30, as you can see, it's 39.7 billion. And so we had updated forecasts. We did a very conservative financial outlook when we did the plan. Very, very conservative. And if you think about it, it makes sense. We were developing these numbers in 2020, height of the pandemic. We did not know where revenues were going to go. So once we had revised revenue projections, it actually went up to 48 billion. And then last year hit, it actually dropped a little bit. So our YOE in 2025, it's 46.3 billion. So that's our anchor for the plan right now. Our plan is a $46 billion plan. We lost 4% in 2025 to 2024. But that's the basis of all the financial decisions that go in our plan. Yeah.
When you go to the voters and ask them to extend this every 20 years, and it passes, what's like the margin? Are people wildly excited about it? Or is it
It's essentially, it was so close to being right below 60-40. So 60% yay, 40% nay. Which in Arizona, that's phenomenal.
What is the threshold? that-
Simple majority.
Oh, wow.
Because it was an extension. And that's part of the reason, if we'd gone for an increase, we need a supermajority. But because it was just an extension, 50 plus 1. So it's a tax, to be honest. Taxes engender feelings. 60 credit to them, we thought was really good. We felt pretty good with that number. So I have pretty strong support. So by the numbers, what does the plan do? We get 331 new freeway miles, 134 new HOV, 1,000 new miles or improved miles of our arterial, new TIs. Other things we do in our valley is we do DHOV, our direct high occupancy vehicle. So what it is, it's an HOV ramp that goes from freeway to freeway. So if you're traveling in the HOV lane, you don't have to come across to get on the ramp. You have a dedicated ramp to go from freeway to freeway. They're they are neat. They're pretty cool. And then on the transit side, also extending our light rail system, adding in bus rapid transit into our region, and then around Arizona State University, we actually have a streetcar. And so this was to expand part of that streetcar that goes around Arizona State University. As we talked about, here's the 46.3 billion. So this is the funding sources. I'm going to take a moment here. So if you look at this slide, that half-cent sales tax, it's a staggering amount of funding we get in the region. I mean, it's almost 60% of our funding comes from the sales tax. Without it, we'd be doing a lot less. And so the thing I want to talk about when we get into this later, the left-hand side, program investments. Coming off our previous plan, we learned some things. Well, I think what we learned more than anything is folks in 2003 couldn't predict the future. So we didn't figure the folks in 2020 would be able to predict the future any better. And so what we did is we said, hey, we can't know everything that we need to do. We held back a significant amount of funding in what we call programmatic investments. And what we do with these is we do competitive calls for projects periodically to program that funding in those categories. So active transportation or non-motorized transportation, however you want to view it. Improving intersections, so we'll do calls for projects and member agencies can submit new project requests. So outside of those projects already identified in the plan. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
A quick question. When you're talking about roadways, improvement and stuff, our area, the Treasure Valley, has competing services that, ACHD has part, City of Boise has part. I don't know about the rest of them. Amy may know. Are you the one ring that rules them all?
No. So we manage the competitive call for project process. The member agencies implement the projects. So our local jurisdictions own the roadways and submit the projects. Now I will say, because it was interesting learning about what happens up here in Treasure Valley, or is it the Treasure Valley or Treasure Valley? Can you say both?
Usually that.
In the Treasure Valley. It was interesting. So we don't have like Highway District 4, and where there might be certain types of management of roadways. So what we'll have is we have roadways. We have a specific roadway in the Southeast Valley. One agency owns half the center line, another agency owns the other half of the center line. And along a 10-mile stretch, 5 different agencies own portions of that roadway. Very difficult to get a project built to that point, when no one owns all of it. Who's going to take the lead to say, we've got to fix it? And there's one agency out of 5 that's like, we desperately need to fix this roadway. And others like, it's hard to convince them, oh, that's a priority. And that's where we kind of come in and try and do help with that is those multi-jurisdictional projects. But if it's a project within one jurisdiction's boundary, it's very self-determinant. So, kind of went through the revenue numbers. I kind of want to talk about how we do our revenue process because I thought it's actually pretty interesting. It's sort of an unusual process. Our partners at the Department of Transportation actually do the fiscal projections for the Highway User Revenue Fund and our sales tax. And you see it says RARF. RARF means the Regional Area Road Fund. It's the half-cent sales tax. That's what we call it. They actually do, they do a very convoluted process to figure out what the projections are. And the one thing is, and why you saw here, the numbers changed. Well, our partners, they do the update every year. They reforecast the numbers. It went down a little bit between 24 and 25. It has, because it was the first year of the plan, had a staggering $1.8 billion impact. I don't know sometimes if they recognize how big the impact is. So they do their part. And then what ADOT does, so ADOT develops a 5-year plan. It's like a TIP. They do their TIP every year, updated every year for the new year. They put that update into their plan. We work with them on the plan. And then what ADOT will do is they develop a draft plan. We have a portion of their plan, and so we review it. And then we will talk about how we implement that through life cycle programs. And then finally, ADOT approves our 5-year plan, and we approve. So what we do is we have 3 life cycle programs. We have a freeway program and an arterial program and a transit program. And so a portion of the sales tax goes to each of those 3 buckets. And so we approve the plan for allocating those dollars in the projects that will get delivered. So the half-cent sales tax, to your question earlier, this is where it comes from. Retail sales by far largest category. But also we have taxes on utilities, restaurant, contracting, real and personal property rentals, and then other activities. Of interest to us, and not knowing the logistics up here, our legislature, I think a lot of push with cost of goods and cost of services had an idea, and they said, you know what we need to do? We're going to stop collecting sales tax on utilities for a period of time. And so you saw our plan, it would have had a $1.6 billion impact if that had passed. Just real money coming out of the plan. Thankfully that died in committee. But those are, so even though we have a plan, we've approved a plan, we have, and I think to the whole concept, we have a plan, now what? You can't just put it on the shelf and ignore it. We're constantly looking at it because revenues change, project costs change. You have to constantly have that plan on your desk thinking about, well, what if this happened? What if we do a lot of contingency planning? I don't know how you guys do, but we're always, well, what if this number, and we'll get to it, what if our federal numbers go down? You know, the federal government says, hey, we got to live a little tighter. What does that mean to us? And this is how the sales tax actually flows. It goes through two buckets. It flows through our Department of Revenue, and then our DOT manages what we call as a Regional Area Road Fund. And then Valley Metro is our Regional Public Transportation Authority. Is that similar to VRT?
Yeah.
So it's equivalent to VRT, but they manage the transit side. And so I talked about ADOT's process to update sales tax and the HERF numbers. What they do is every August we get economists from across the country and say, hey, what do you think the numbers are going to look like in the Phoenix market for the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? And we actually take this into the process and revise estimates. And so I tried to explain to our policymakers, it's going to change every year. They're not going to say, oh, the numbers we gave you last year, they're spot on, exactly the same, nothing's changed, especially given some recent developments. So we're always looking at what and the reason I think this is important, when you looked at that slide, and if I had not done a revenue update for a few years to that group. If I'd done it every year, I would have had a few years of growth. Oh, hey, it went from 39 billion to 42 billion to 46 billion. Well, we don't want them thinking, oh, hey, it's new money, we can just go spend it all. You know, you have to think about long term. And so the same thing this year was, yes, it's down 4%, but we don't need to jettison the plan. We don't need to start cutting projects or delaying projects. These are normal fluctuations, and over time they'll work themselves out. And that was the takeaway was that it was the first year. First year of the first phase. Have some patience, have some trust in the process. So this is the sales tax. This is how it's broken up. 40% goes to freeways, 22.5% goes to arterials and those programs, those programmatic investments you saw, and then 37% goes to public transportation. Yeah.
I'm assuming freeways, you're getting federal funding to go along with what you're putting for the freeways? Or-
Yep. Yeah, we'll talk about that. There's a history of some of that. But this one's interesting. So I talked about the veto, and the legislature kind of had a different flavor. So when we came back to the legislature, starting really the fall of 22 and then moving into the 23 legislative session, one of their main sticking points was, we're maybe not adverse to the sales tax. You can't use any of it on light rail. So you can't expand the system with light rail. Our original plan had baked that into the numbers that we would have that sales tax funding to do it. That was a big fiscal shift. We had to start rebalancing, okay, well, we'll take federal dollars off of this project and put it on that project. So we were still able to do the plan. This was a big shift, is that their intent was, hey, you just can't extend the system with sales tax dollars. Yeah.
Why?
Why?
Por qué?
Because
Por qué?
BRT is coming?
But to my other point, some people have this is where it's very difficult if you think about it. We have, in our state, we have 30 legislative districts. So we have 30 state senators and 60 representatives across the entire state of Arizona. Majority of those are not in the greater Phoenix region. They may not have a lot of familiarity or friendliness towards transit. And so that's the challenge of a plan when we have to go to the legislature. Our voters said, hey, and our elected officials said, we love this plan. We like this layout, your thoughts, your concepts. And we just ran into folks that said we don't. And so that's kind of been the sticking point, is we have to be very accommodating. Yes, it was fine, it worked out, but that's the thing, is if they've told us, hey, full stop, we like this, we don't like that. Okay, if we know that's the sandbox we're playing, we work around, but that was the reality, is they said, you can't, and so we had to figure that out.
You sure you're not talking about Idaho?
Huh?
You sure you're not describing Idaho?
Talking to folks across the country, our story's not unique. And yeah, we just have an unusual, it's just perceptions of it. But I think we still did well with it. I mean, we still developed a plan. It was just a little more work on the back end to get that done. That worked out well.
Can you talk about what that last bullet means, a little bit different jurisdiction, meaning outside of Maricopa County?
Meg, what was your question?
Oh, she's asking about the last bullet. Hold on, I have to read this one again. Oh, yeah, so, yeah, I think this was looking at how we pay for transit service. So some of our transit service is managed by, we have our RPT, it's like the RT. And then we have the city of Phoenix also operates, owns and operates transit in the region. And I think this was really to the, those who bought service, like you couldn't find a backdoor way to use the sales tax for it. Like, oh, hey, I'll pay for it, but you wash it through here and give me the money back somewhere else. I think that's what they were. I may have to look at that. I'll get the answer back on that one. I'll double check on that one. And then, so the 22.5%, essentially, roughly half of it goes to the arterial program, the arterial life cycle program. The other half went to those competitive programs. But again, we saw, as we went through the legislature, they did say, here's caps. So we didn't have a free-for-all of like, oh, hey, we can spend, one of the things they said, not more than 5% of that portion there could be used for certain projects, mainly active transportation, emerging tech, and then air quality. I don't know why they were against air quality, but that's what they did. But that's okay. Again, it worked within the constraints of the plan. It fit what we envisioned doing anyhow, but it's just they set some parameters on the process. This just talks about, and the question, what's an arterial? This is how they define it.
Arterial things right here.
Yeah, they had their whole thing of like, this is what an arterial is. Essentially, they were ensuring that
According to definition.
the projects in the plan met a certain criteria, so you couldn't just pave a road outside of Joe's house. You had to, had to meet these definitions. So that's sales tax. So highway user revenue fund. We're gonna really, you can see again, driver's license fees, vehicle fees, gas and used fuel tax. We're gonna really go into that. Motor carrier taxes, and then I love when they do this. So smart and safe and easy. Anyone have any idea what that might be? Recreational marijuana. So recreational marijuana is legal in the state of Arizona. A portion of that is set aside towards transportation. Call that Operation Pothole. Thank you, I'll be here all night. No, but we do get set aside of that. It's one of those oddities of the legislation when the voters passed the approval of recreational marijuana. They said, oh, part of it will go towards transportation, so we do get some funding there. State gas taxes. This is, again, gas taxes. Apologies, that is a little small there. You can see the state gas tax by state across the country. California is the highest, no shocker. But you can see where Idaho and Arizona rank. Idaho's 33 cents. Arizona's 18.6 cents. We've not increased our gas tax since 1991. Fourth longest in the nation since we've increased our gas tax.
What's ours? Does anyone know?
2015 or 2016, somewhere there.
2015.
Right, see, I did some research. Yeah, ours has not been since 1991. That's a long time to not increase it. And the other thing, our gas tax is not, and I don't believe Idaho's is either, it's not indexed for inflation. Flat number. So what that means, this is the highway user revenue fund. This is how much was collected each year since 2000, accounting for inflation. And you can see the purchasing power of that is actually less than in 2000. Because our gas tax is not indexed for inflation, has not been increased, we're fighting a losing battle with state funds. And so when we think about the funding available to our plan, it's not the most, it's a great source, it's a meaningful source, but it's just not a big source. It's just the reality of the numbers. Yeah, and when we control for inflation, 45% less than and that's the thing. The state grew 45%, and our actual purchasing power of HERF went down. I mean, same thing in Idaho, in the Treasure Valley, same thing. Huge growth area, but the gas tax isn't changing, so you're having to do more with less.
How do you manage the electric vehicles, the ones that aren't using that gas?
Thankfully, they've started to adjust it in the registration fees. So we're looking more on that. There's been proposals floated both at the local level, state level, national level, come up with some sort of fair use. Hey, EVs should pay their share. You know, they're using the roads, they're wearing the roads down, but they don't pay anything in gas tax. How do you account for it? I don't know if you guys have ever heard of VMT, vehicle miles traveled. Your neighbors to the west have been in this game. Oregon has done a lot with that, but it's a difficult thing. A lot of issues with privacy concerns and other things about how would you ever know how much someone drove to then assess what their tax should be. But that's one of the issues is in our state, in Arizona, full stop, we have a Republican majority in the legislature, difficult with taxes. It's just a tough word. So sometimes they talk about fees, but even then it's still hard when they think of its additional cost to their constituents. So we've struggled with how do you make it sustainable? We'll talk about it's the same issue at the federal level. Federal gas tax hasn't been increased since I think it's '93. So the same issue. The federal gas tax is having the same issues. All right, ADOT discretionary funding. This one's fun. So it's called the Casa Grande results. Casa Grande is a nice little town south of the Metro Phoenix area. And so, and this is interesting because this is actually, while I say it's 1999, I would argue this is a byproduct of conversations from the 1980s. When you saw that first original freeway map, 1986, recognition in our region, we had some very thoughtful folks thinking of the future. They knew there wasn't enough funding at the state, from the state and at the state level to build those freeways. That's where they came up with half-cent sales tax. So we did that. We taxed our own residents. We started building out those freeways. The state said, hey, you're doing that and you're doing so well, you don't need our funding. We'll go spend it elsewhere in the state. So they weren't really taking care of our region. So by the late 90s, it had become an issue. And in fact, a bunch of folks across the entire state got together and said, we need to solve this. We need to talk about funding across the state and how it gets done. And so what they really wanted to look at was what are those resources available? And they came out of it with a committee. The committee meets every November, and that's exactly what they talk about are the statewide resources and how they get allocated across the state. But that came out of this 1999 conversation of, and really where it was a concept of fair share. Not knowing what is the population of Idaho around 2 million?
Almost.
Almost 2 million? And you guys are just south of 1 million in this great area?
About 850,000.
But a sizable number. So, Arizona, our region, and PAG is the Pima Association of Governments, the city of Tucson. Think about the city of Tucson. 80% of the population lives in our two regions. And we weren't getting buckus. Nothing. And so the group got together and we said, hey, this isn't fair. This isn't fair for our residents. They're paying into HERF. Back then, HERF was still doing well. The vehicles, the mileage, everything's in our counties. We're not seeing any benefit back. And so, and we even said, we know Great Arizona needs help. There's not enough population there. It's only 20% of the people are there. And so what they said is, okay, the discretionary funding that comes in, that probably needs to be divvied up. And that's what they came through here was a concept of divvying it up. And it ranged, you see, between 40 and 68%. They landed on a 50-50 split. So MAG and PAG get 50%, ADOT keeps the other 50% for Greater Arizona. It's worked out. It's interesting, I was in a meeting the other day, someone was like, hey, and we call it cost grinding results. That's a very known terminology. Have we ever thought about opening that back up? No, you don't want to. Because from our perspective, we still know we're a donee, we're contributing more to the state than we probably get. And back in 1999, 76% of the population was in those two counties. So what came out of this was the state, that Senate Bill 1102, it's kind of like a bifurcated path that comes together, acknowledged what MAG does. We're the regional planning organization. We do the plan, we do the budgets, we do the competitive projects. And then similarly, the State Transportation Board, who has oversight over those discretionary funds, acknowledged and endorses 37% of the funding comes to MAG. So when you saw that first slide, the ADOT discretionary funding, that's what this is. And what it is, to kind of the earlier point about the federal funds, it's a portion of ADOT's federal funds and or their HERF, but we get 37% of it, which is substantial. I mean, ADOT gets, I would do very simple math, it's $1 billion. We get 370 million. And then just the last bullet is just that ADOT updates those funding estimates as we talked earlier about the 5-year program. IIJA, I don't know how many people are into the federal stuff. Current surface transportation bill expires in September. Singularly largest bill. There's been questions. I've done a lot of presentations about reauthorization. That's how they extend the bill. And whether or not reauthorization will happen by September when it expires, no. I don't know if you ever listen. It's a difficult path. It was already a difficult path, and there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of issues front and center. So we'll see. I don't think it's front burner with them right now. They say it is. We'll see what happens, but there's a lot of questions about what this next bill will look like. So policy requirements, real quick. Kind of talk about. Oh, I had a cool graphic here. To implement our plan, we really have 3 components: state, federal, regional. Really, as we've talked, the state is our biggest one. I'm going to go through a couple slides really quick because I want to save time for the case study. One thing that, so I said the legislation, and we talked about transit in there, one thing they've said is the fare box on our transportation system needs to recover a certain percentage of funding. That was put in statute, so by 2028, they need to recover 10% of the cost of the service through fare box, and then moving up to 20% by 2032.
Where are you starting at? Like, what is it what was it? What that
Depends.
Okay.
Depends. The challenge of this is the regionally funded routes, fare box recovery versus the city of Phoenix's. So one thing, just transit in Phoenix, and I don't know what it's like up here. We have federal funds, we have our sales tax funding. 70% of our transit funding comes from local agencies. Our member agencies pay 70% of the transit cost. So it really is. There's a lot behind this number of like, oh, how do you define that 10%? Yeah.
One of the things that I wonder about is if the metropolitan area jacked up parking rates. Inspiration.
Oh, to force me people to take transit?
Well, yeah, pretty simple.
Yeah, there's a whole concept of, the concept is it's choice riders. People who have a choice but choose to take their car. What would it take to move them out of that choice? I don't know.
Well, you're doubling it in 4 years.
Yeah, it's a very quick uptick to get to a 20% recovery rate. And then what happens is if you don't, you have to do certain things to say, hey, you can't use sales tax for those routes that didn't meet those targets. Yeah, it's good times. One thing, the way our region is built, we have 3 policy committees. We have a management committee that's city and town managers. We have a transportation policy committee, which is made up, well, I'll go backwards. We have a regional council, that's our final authority, the mayors from our various member agencies. And then we have a transportation policy committee, and then one thing that the statute did is it said, the statute defines this committee and said, hey, you know what? We're gonna put some legislative appointees on the committee. So it just makes it a little more challenging that we have various interests on our committees. So we have member agencies, but we also have folks from the unincorporated parts of our county, a taxpayer interest group, a housing group. So it's kind of fun. Let's do it. So this was another oddity of the legislation. Lane reduction. You can't use sales tax on a project that will reduce lanes. So you can't, different terms, road diets, roadway reconfigurations, things like that. But you can't take out capacity unless you do these steps. So there was a fear about, oh, hey, you're going to take away road lanes for cars for whatever purpose. We don't like that. Hey, you need to prove that you can still not impact And a lot of these came in the second version of the legislation. These weren't in the original legislation, so a lot of different hills we had to climb. Budgetary process, I'm just gonna skip past this. It just says, who is responsible for what. Oh, I like this slide. So these are all the funding sources available to our region. Sales tax, we have federal funding, we actually have member dues. A small amount comes from our member agencies and local funds. And this is how we use them. You saw the 3 life cycle programs and the competitive program. The up one is MAG's budget. Didn't want to go into that. So I like to show people, here's where the sales tax funding goes. It goes everywhere. That's why it's so critical. And then here's where the FHWA funding goes. I'll just skip through it real quick.
It's like they paint.
It looks like Tetris.
Yeah.
Is there a population group that's adamantly fighting you left and right?
About things we do?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have one. Probably one more than others. Yeah, especially when we were going through developing the plan, especially after the veto and developing, thinking about what the legislation was going to look like, and we do updates. Hey, where are we at with the plan? They show up on our meetings and want to kind of express their thoughts about where we were going. But really, just mainly an anti-tax group, more in the anti-tax space. I don't think they minded transportation. I just don't think they wanted that path to get there. So dollars to action. So how are projects implemented? As I noted, we have the 3 life cycle programs and our competitive programs. We'll go through these pretty quick. Life cycle programs, it's just how we implement projects. We have a defined list of projects in our plan. We update them constantly. Cost estimates, that's a huge component. And as I noted, MAG develops the plan, but we don't implement projects. We aren't in the project delivery business. Our partners at ADOT and our local agencies and our transit agencies do that. So real quickly, freeway program. These are all the freeway projects that are planned under our Proposition 479. As I noted, really only one new freeway. A lot of it is improving existing roadways and improving capacity. Although I will note, if you have driven in the valley, I-17, big north-south freeway, they need to reconstruct that entire freeway. I'm curious to see how they do that. They talk about double decking the freeway, all sorts of, who knows? It's billions of dollars.
You gotta match the 4 level in LA. Come on.
And so it was interesting, and I wanted to kind of show this. These are all the projects that we will be working on in phase 1 of our plan. So our plan actually has 4 5-year phases. Phase 1 goes through 2030. You can see there's projects going all over the valley right now. We'll come back and talk about the Northwest Valley and specifically Loop 303 at 155th Avenue. Our arterial program, you can see all the projects on our arterial network. Again, a lot of roadway projects. Someone had asked this question and they're like, oh, it seems like there's more of this type of project here, more of that type of project there. It's really how our valley built out. The center built out first, the East Valley built next, and then the West Valley, so everyone's on a different journey. The East Valley is built out on the freeways. Their freeways are done. The West Valley still is looking more in the freeway space. Hey, we want to get, we talked about State Route 30, so it's kind of interesting how everyone's like, oh, you go do that. We're not ready for that yet. These are all the arterial projects that will be done over the 4 phases. It's all over the valley. Even some right next to my house. Transit program. We have 4 components to our transit program. We do bus operating, which, operations and service. We do regional services. We have express buses, so like commuter buses. We do then our federally required ADA service. And then high capacity. This is where there's been the most interest with bus rapid transit, light rail extension, and streetcar, and then bus capital, which is just paying for the buses and the facilities. Here's the high capacity transit. So we're actually, those red lines are the bus rapid transit, or BRT, that we will be implementing in the region. This is new. So kind of like a modified bus service. Should be cool to see how that works. And finally, competitive programs. These are the 8 competitor. Yeah, here's all the competitive programs. What's interesting, and we do this, some of the funding in these competitive programs are actually in the life cycle programs. Some people see this and oh my goodness, there's $800 million to do bicycle and pedestrian. Not totally. All right.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Of course you can.
The BRT projects, were those in there before the state legislation
Yep.
prohibiting work on rail? They were in there before?
Yeah, so BRT was a little different, but yeah, even the rail extension projects were in the plan.
Okay.
So we didn't pull them out. The only thing we did, so if you think about it, the original plan was 25 years. It had 5 phases. They said you can only do 20, so we're like, okay. We have 4 funded phases, and we have a phase 5 that is unfunded. So the projects are all still, every project is still in the plan. Some are funded, some are unfunded.
Okay.
But yeah, so we didn't pull any projects out or adjust any projects based on the legislative oversight. We just said, okay, well, we have to rethink how we fund the projects. And we got it done. I mean, props to the team. Got it figured out, but it was a lot of work to how can we still honor the legislative intent while delivering the investments our member agencies wanted.
A very in the weeds question.
Technical.
So, for the projects that you have identified as funded, and then you mentioned you also have the competitive programs, for those projects that are identified as funded to eventually be included in the TIP, do those agencies still need to apply for that funding, or does that just happen automatically and they only have to apply for projects not specifically called out in the long range?
Only for projects not called out. So the only thing we have done that's different, when we originally did the plan, and if you look at it, I'll send it to you so you can put it along with the presentation. In the plan, we said phase 1. We didn't say a specific year, we just said phase 1, 26 through 30. As we now are developing and implementing the plan, we are now starting to slot projects into years of this is 27, this is 28, this is 29. A lot of it, constructability, availability of materials, sequencing, and funding. Funding being the big one. But yeah, so so the competitive ones are the only ones that actually apply. For everything else, it's baked into the plan. And we work with our agencies about, hey, you have an arterial project to widen this road. When do you think you want to go? And so we've built out, we've like fund sourced all the projects throughout the whole 20 years now. One thing we kind of show people is like, the programs and the lifecycle programs, they're all part of the bigger plan. Like one isn't separate from the other, and really it's all collaboration and coordination. To date, that has been the biggest thing. Quickly through this, we have done a call for projects. We did the two arterial programs, rehab and widening. We did our first call for projects last summer. Went well. We had 150 million between the 2 programs available. Got 350 million in requests. Needless to say, winners and losers, but it was very interesting because we had to develop the policies, the weighting, the scoring, the evaluation process, but I think it went pretty well. Here we just talked about how we funded it. So we had 150 million, and you can see we were oversubscribed in both buckets, but we were able to fund 10 projects, 17 projects total. These are the rehab projects all across the valley. And then these are the widening projects, fewer funds.
Question on the rehab, where's the line between preventative maintenance and rehab? Do these funds pay for any preventative maintenance?
No, you at least have to mill 1.5 inches. Yeah, this is not, it's even in policies, it's not like fog coats or slurry seals. It's intended, you're milling out the existing roadway surface. And also the other thing that was very interesting, when people first thought, oh, it's preservation. Like, no, you have to do more. So the intent was, you're not just fixing the roadway. You're looking at safety issues, so putting in lighting. If you have gaps in the sidewalk, upgrading intersections. The intent was to do it all in one project, under the auspices of rehabbing the roadway.
Just a quick question. Are you widening any of them, like the bicycle walking area?
Oh, my God.
Like a combination bicycle walk area on the side? They call them wide walks or whatever, really?
So we have, some do that. So we have multi-use paths off roadway. Some do it, some don't. A lot of these, what you really see is striped bicycle lanes within the roadway. Some do protected, some just do painted. It's very Phoenix. We have some that are Tempe down by ASU does a lot of protected bike lanes, so they have curb protected bike lanes. But yeah, some do it. A lot of it, the challenge is they're trying to retrofit these back into existing spaces. There is not a lot of right of way. So it's very difficult to come back in and say, hey, we want to take that old 4-foot sidewalk and make it 8 foot. They just don't have the real estate to make So those widening, so key takeaways, you know, we got the tax passed. We went from these 2 cool documents to 3 much more cool documents. And that's it. So any questions on that side, and then we're gonna go into what I think is an interesting case study. Put it on time. Or fabulous. Fabulous.
Quick,
Well, here in the later.
All right, this is just kind of a general overall question. I'm assuming that the abstinence tax was statewide,
Yep, countywide.
countywide.
Yeah.
So within the legislature to get a countywide.
Yes, because we have to. The legislature said if you want to tax your own residents, you have to get legislative
Well,
approval.
that makes sense, but I didn't know. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
it's only,
great.
and it's, and so the,
You're dealing just with, you're not having to deal with anybody going outside your county.
but the issue is kind of like you have here. Our region covers 2 counties, or 1 county part of the second. We can't use sales tax funding in that second county, so we have to use our federal funds. We have to get much more creative when we fund projects in their region versus using the sales tax in our region. Yeah.
what is the sales tax rate?
It's a 0.5%.
I mean, the,
9.1.
on the actual purchase, the total, for like county resident goes and buys a car, what's the total?
Oh, I think it's like
9.1.
Yeah, yeah, the total cumulative
Yeah, right,
is
yeah.
9.1%.
Okay. And then one other question,
Sure.
is your entity able to bond for projects?
Yes, we can. It came up. So one thing we had to do so one thing, you saw those wonderful revenue numbers were at $46.3 billion. Construction costs walloped us. Went a little higher than that number, and in fact, actually, we had originally bonding into the program to rebalance the program because of where construction costs were going. We pulled it out because, you know, you got to pay for the debt. We've had agencies ask. They'll say, hey, we have a project in phase 2. We'd like it in phase 1. How can we do it? We're like, well, you can pay for the debt service to get it. And then they see the cost to bond to get that accelerated. And they're like, we're going to look another way, see what else we can do. Yeah, that's been a big question is bonding. Yes, sir.
I was gonna say that, like, with the lane reduction that you mentioned, the law that was passed, it's kind of similar to one that was just passed recently in Idaho as well, where you can't go below, I believe, 50 feet for a roadway. You can't like restrict it, and I don't think there is a state funding thing. Like, it's not like you can't do it if it involves state funding. I think it's just
It's just a
across
general,
the board. You
on all
can't do it
roadways
at
in
all.
the state?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, this one, they tied it very specifically to, if a project uses sales tax funding, you can't do this. There was a real pushback against that. There was a perception that a lot of agencies were taking out car lanes and putting in bike lanes and bike boulevards and all this, and so there was just, I think, kind of a pushback for that. All right, case study. We're gonna talk about the Northwest Valley. High growth area of the city, the greater Phoenix region. So what's going on out there? So what we do, which is kind of cool, we do commute shed analytics. We look at where people who live in that Northwest Valley, how long it takes them to get to different parts of the valley. And so what we had done is we did these commute sheds, and if you see in these 2 commute sheds, they have a difficult time in, so this like says, hey, what would it take you to get to Phoenix? And then what would it take to get to Goodyear? And we figured out that in the Northwest Valley, the commute times are just abysmal. And so, kind of tried to figure out what. We'll start this again. So this is the population in 2010 in the Northwest Valley. And by the Northwest Valley, we have the loop, that outer loop, that loop 303, going up to State Route 74. So you see, in 2010, most of the folks live south of the 303. And then as we run the slide, and this is the projections for 2050. One thing you'll note is if you go back, one thing fairly absent out here, it does not have a very, very robust arterial network. There are not a lot of roadways out here. And you see where the population is going. So what started, our partners, they did a study back in 2022, and they looked at that, and if you look at this interchange down kind of in the lower middle, that's the US 60, which is going northwest, southeast, and the 303. And so ADOT did a study and said, hey, this area is doing terribly. What can we do to fix it? And so what they were really looking at is what could they do in the short and long term to kind of fix this area. And so our regional council actually approved funding, small dollar improvements to try and help alleviate the congestion out there. And in the same time, we kicked off our own study, starting at that TI, going all the way out to State Route 74 to see just what's going on out there. The study we did, it's interesting, we had 6 partners. So one thing, and I'll show it later, along Grand Avenue, which is that diagonal roadway, we have the BNSF rail line that runs right next to the roadway. It's about within 50 feet of the actual roadway. Needless to say, access control is a big issue when you're trying to get across a main railroad artery. So we worked with, the other thing is, let's see if I can show it on this slide. If you kind of see about that 211th Avenue, that general area right there, BNSF is also going to put an intermodal facility out there where they're going to offload their rail cars onto semis. That's going to help the roadway. So we actually worked with BNSF as well and talk about what to do. One thing we did not talk about in this study was we didn't look at grade separating the railroad. That's a separate proposition. And so the study we did, kicked it off in March, did some open houses, in-person public meetings. We did another open house last November. And we're finishing the study right now. We're getting the final reports. And this is what's going to tell us how we fix this area. And so what we're really looking at here, this is the study area. So we talked about that Northwest Valley. And what we're really looking at, that part, the green at the bottom of the map, that's the 6303 TI. And then we go all the way out up to State Route 74. And you can see where that BNSF facility is. That's a major facility they want to build out in that region. So when we look at these, and this is like, where we talk about is we're translating the plan into action. So we had a plan that said this is all we're going to do. This has come up since the plan was approved that this has become an area of concern. So we're really trying to work through how do you take an existing plan and then adapt it to now meet changing conditions on the ground? Because I think that's the biggest thing is once you approve a plan, it's good for about the day you approve it, and then those things change. And so what they were really looking at is the southern half of this study area has really been the focus right now, and it's mainly because there are not enough access points going from the Loop 303 to the US 60. Yes, sir.
Is there any way that when a developer is coming in, not so much the BNSF, but like the residential type property people, make them pay for it?
Local control. We have no land use planning authority. It's on local control. So it's really our member jurisdictions work with the developers and set what their requirements are for that. So what you really see here, and what the study kind of looked at, and I think the right-hand graphic's more interesting. These are all the travel patterns into that 6303 TI. And of note, if you look on the 303 where the nearest TI connections, there's 6 miles to the east and 3 miles to the south. In other words, there are not a lot of, when the freeway was built, when the 303 was built, the development out there and the growth out there was just not happening, and now everyone has moved out to that part of the valley. So what the study recommended, really kind of a 3-pronged approach, do some small near-term improvements, and I said we come back to 155th Avenue, we'll talk about that, and then eventually get to the major upgrades. So you want to, you can't eat the whole elephant in one bite. You got to start at small and build your way up. So you give the residents some near-term relief, build out what will help a lot, and then eventually get to the full rebuild of that system TI. So these are near-term improvements. I wish it was a little bigger. But what you can see here, so essentially 163rd Avenue runs north and east. A ton of residents live out there. This is their singular access point. So what we have really done essentially is adding a lot of turning movements just to try and help the queues so that we get more people through an intersection through one cycle. It's helped. It's made it better. We just have completed all of the improvements earlier this year, but it's a temporary fix. We knew when we built it, it was a temporary fix, but the intent was do something now. The residents were really clamoring. They're like, they were sitting in 10-minute queues, 15-minute queues to clear one intersection. The other thing we did was on the 6303, so this is a little bit, if you see that 160, this is a little bit south of that section. And so again, same kind of thing, really building and increasing turning movements so that we can get more folks to the area. Really was actually becoming, and I didn't want to include we had a couple of photos, but you can see the backup on Grand Avenue, mile and a half backup on an arterial roadway. It was crazy. And then the other, so like there was essentially, if you think about it, this is the other part of the 6303 or the 6063rd improvement. So the other thing, if you look down the lower left of the map, that's the 6303 TI. So the one thing we identified is there has to be another access point. And so the plan now is we are going to add a new traffic interchange at 155th Avenue, which will allow those. So if you think about those residents that are up here, they were all going down to 163rd. So this gives them a second access point out of those neighborhoods to get into, get into the freeway network. Apologies, I just realized my transitions. Okay. Other thing we did, so we talked about this. This is the freeway program, working on the freeway system. We also had all those arterial projects. I talked about we had the arterial program. The arterial program has 91 projects defined over the 20 years. One of the projects, the city surprised that owns the land out there, had a project at 163rd Avenue. They were going to extend 163rd Avenue. And what they figured out is if ADOT will build that new TI at 155th Avenue, and they build a project on 155th Avenue, they can move a lot of traffic through that area. And so they came to Mag and they said, what if we wanted to swap the two projects? And we have a process in place for member agencies to swap projects. One thing, if you think about it, we approved the plan in 2021. It was developed from projects in 2019. I think you probably have the same thing. Growth has changed. Priorities have changed. Needs have changed. And so we have a very, I think, adaptive plan that allows folks to come back and say, hey, we thought the growth and development was going to be in A, it's now B, and so we allow them to switch projects. They can't get more funding, they can't get the project earlier, but they can swap out projects. So that's what they did here. And then, so eventually the other solution is, on the left-hand side is 163rd Avenue traffic interchange, and then you have the 303 TI. And so they're looking to build a consolidated improvement to fix both of those interchanges all at once. And so here, if you look at it, this cool animation actually shows how we will build a CD system and distributed road network to actually get folks through this area with fewer conflict points. And if you'll look at the 303 on the right, that is do you guys have any diverging diving interchanges in Idaho?
Two in Utah, few of them.
Couple in Utah.
There's two, but I think there's Pocatello, I think has one.
Okay.
And then I think Rexburg, Idaho would have one.
So what it does is essentially it crosses the traffic over. So it reduces a lot of movement and you have fewer conflict points. So that's what they're doing here is they're gonna improve the access point of where those folks coming on 163rd, they can actually come off 163rd onto this collector network and then get onto the 303 without ever getting on a Grand Avenue. So essentially we're moving a lot of the conflict and a lot of the traffic off of Grand Avenue so that it doesn't have the same issue.
Does it have HOV on that one? Without going.
I think eventually, I'd have to check on that if there's a DHOV on 6303. Full disclosure, I do not live out in that area. I live nowhere near that area. That's a long way for me to get out to. And so really, if you think about what we're trying to do here is, and what these two, I think graphics are kind of cool. These are like where we see development, where we see access, and it's really trying to fill gaps in the network. Because one of the biggest things we have is as you saw, the arterial network is not very robust out there yet. And so it's very difficult for folks out there to get around. And so the thought is, if we can sequence this better, what we do is we can expand and you see a lot of these conflict points. We start pulling out some of those conflict points. We actually improve reliability. And by 2050, we have actually a fairly well built out network out there. and hopefully it should be running fairly well. Green means good, red means not so good.
Within this plan, are you seeing potential safety improvements as well as congestion by reducing some of the conflict points?
I would say they go hand in hand. If you have, we notice it on a lot of the freeways, and we've got some studies going on. A lot of congestion. So we're doing a study by ASU. There's two freeways that intersect out by ASU. And so there's a lot of bottlenecks out there. And so we started doing a study, and we said, hey, what's causing it? What's the issues out there? And so it's kind of a lot of that. So you get a lot of congestion, and you get a lot of weaving movements, and you get a lot of queue jumping. So you get, and especially the speed differential on queue jumping, that's the safety issues. We get so many accidents out there. And so that's why they're starting to look at how can they minimize it. So you're improving congestion and safety at the same time, because if you get rid of what's causing the congestion, in theory, you're improving roadway safety. So yeah, we've kind of, I think, envisioned it going hand in hand. Yeah, and then the other one is they look at state route center. But that was always interesting, is, we look at this plan, and we've always focused on the southern part of this, but like eventually we're gonna see growth out to the north as well, so we have to get there as well. And so in summary, we did a study, ADOT did a study, we did a study, figured out how to improve the freeway, how to figure out the arterial, and that's it. All right. Now, any just random questions?
Additional questions?
Question?
Yeah,
Well, I have a couple, but
that's fine.
is that all right? Okay.
I have a couple answers.
All right. Well, I mean, just kind of like your summary. I mean, early on in your presentation, you're talking about how like Phoenix Metro's travel times and compared to peer cities, and just like how do you explain that? How do you think Phoenix has done that while having so much growth in the valley and still keeping commute times flat or manageable? I think it's just like the geography of the area. Can other cities kind of duplicate that success?
We talked about it before we started. I think one of those, a lot of the, especially like the 303 and some of the other freeways we built, we were a little ahead of the growth in those areas. So we had a freeway network built before we saw massive growth. It's almost one of those, if you build it, they'll come, or is it induced demand, or if you build it, they're going to show up, or if you don't build it, will they go somewhere else? So I think that was a lot of it. Is we just built the network. It was really going back to the 80s. When they built the original freeway system, our commute times were nothing. I mean, the roadways were. It was as I told Amy. I was driving on. I think it was 84. There was the direction I was going delightful. I was free flow. I was like, wow, you could have 1 million people out here. But I learned that I was when you was conditioned, I was going the proper direction. But our freeway system was like that, so we were built so that we could handle some of that. And that's why I think now we're moving out of just capacity, like build lanes, add new freeways, and more about optimizing the system. So it's now like reducing conflict points, doing the DHOV ramps, stuff like that. So I think that's going to help us more so doing that. Yeah, good question.
And then just the Phoenix Valley in general, like what do you see are the biggest constraints to future population growth? I guess I'm just thinking to myself on water resources, but
yeah,
are there other pressing constraints on the cities?
I mean, water is always one that comes up in the valley because it's a desert. Climate, it is very hot there. So I think I think from an economic standpoint, we're still an attractive destination, so we see a lot of businesses investing, which bring employment, employers. So far, we don't see a tipping point where there's something like, oh, if we hit a threshold, we're going to start seeing folks leave. But and I think that's why when we built this plan, it's very conservative. We took conservative approaches to what we thought the plan would be, and not like, oh, well, we'll have 10 million people by 2050. We assumed a modest growth. We'll 7 million residents by 2050. But we still have a ton of space out there, so they keep coming. What we've really seen is that they're building on the periphery. the southeast and northwest valleys where everyone's going. So, but that's what we're doing as a planning agency, is we're getting ahead of that and now identifying, hey, what's this gonna look like in 10, 15, 20 years? And starting to think about, and developing recommendations of, we may need to do certain things by a certain threshold of population. Yeah, it's just, you just don't know. I remember we see certain roads and like, oh, we're gonna need to build this road, we're gonna have so much development out there, and 20 years later, no one's out there still. That's just not where the folks went, so.
Because you didn't build the road.
Tomato, tomato, yeah. But that's just it. If do you build to, get the demand out there? Or do then you have residents who are like, I'm in the built environment, I want you to improve my space. I live in the middle of Phoenix. There are no roadways to build. They are not widening the freeway that's by my house. The one thing they are doing that's interesting, and we talked, and I said I would come back to this, the pavement surfaces in the valley can be chaotic. Back when we built that regional freeway system, they put a rubberized asphalt coat on the top of the surface. They called it quiet pavement. Wonderful. Smooth as butter, quiet, it aged. It life cycled. It has life cycled hard. And so when we built this plan and we worked with our elected officials, we gave them two options. We're like, we can do that. We can repave it. It's gonna be very expensive, but if you want, we'll do it. Or, and what we're doing is we are taking up that roadway surface and we're grinding it off and putting we're just going back down to the concrete surface underneath. So the freeway by my house, the one thing they will do is they're taking off the cracked old pavement and putting the new diamond grind surface. I'm very excited. We're just getting a lot of potholes in the freeways. They're past their useful life. Other question?
Do you have trouble getting the land where you need to put these?
Yeah, so that State Route 30, the last new freeway we're gonna build, the right of way to acquire out there to build that new freeway, it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not cheap. Land in the Valley of the Sun is not cheap. And yeah, it's just expensive. That's an interesting, we're doing a presentation talking about that. It's the last new freeway. And so our folks in the West Valley really want that built yesterday. And we have to keep explaining to them, it's a new freeway, there's a lot to do, and the utilities out there. We actually have the water line that supplies Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station runs through that project.
Oh, wow.
We have 120 kV power lines running through that, crisscrossing the project. So we can't do it as quick as they'd like. I think that's one thing, if you take something away, when you message transportation, it's a long-term investment. You don't flip the switch. People are like, I want this intersection fixed. Even if we had all the wherewithal in the world, we can't do it that way. It takes time. And that's what we've tried to educate people is, we're gonna get there, it just takes a lot of time. Anything else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned BNSF.
Yes.
I guess I'm curious kind of about just your freight network, transportation network, if it's, how built out. I'm not familiar at all with like the Phoenix Valley.
Yeah, so
in terms of rail or-
the big line is that line, that BNSF line. It runs, comes from that Northwest Valley, goes through, eventually follows Interstate 10 down south towards Tucson. We do not have commuter rail in the region. We only have freight rail, so there's no commuter rail in our region. We don't have Amtrak. Amtrak left many years ago. But yeah, so it has a lot of capacity. It handles a lot of freight traffic through there. Hence why they're building that new facility in the Northwest Valley, is they have that much.
But that's the main line.
That's the main line.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a couple of main lines. The rest of it, little spur lines, but most of it, there's just two main lines that run through the region.
Is there talk of connecting to like Las Vegas or Los Angeles with high-speed rail or anything like that?
They have talked about building a new interstate to connect all the way, for those that remember back in the day, the Canamex corridor. If you remember Canamex, it was going to be a corridor connecting Canada, the US, and Mexico. It kind of fell off. But they want to build Interstate 11. So Phoenix and Las Vegas are the only two major metropolitan areas not connected by an interstate of that size. Problem is this, it's super expensive. And without congressional help, you can't build it. It's too expensive. But that's, so before they look at any sort of
Yeah.
rail solution,
Yeah.
they can't even get an interstate built that out there, and that's what they look to do. Maybe someday, we'll see. Anything else?
So the.
Yeah, please, awesome.
The sales tax,
Yep,
because it can be spent on state projects or local projects or transit projects, how is that money, I don't want to say divvied up because I saw like percentages as to how it can be spent, but is it up to the state to bring in the sales tax revenue, give it to you guys? Does the state
Yeah,
then
so-
contribute?
now, the Department of Revenue, our state Department of Revenue, just processes the tax collections and puts the funding in an account for us that we
Okay.
use. The one thing we do, kind of an offshoot of that question, we do think about the projects we have to build and the fund sourcing. Like, especially on the freeway, what balance of sales tax funding versus federal funding. We've had some projects that we sales tax funded only because we, certain constraints or requirements. So we do think about what the blend looks like when we're doing it.
Okay.
And the arterial projects, all the arterials you saw, 100% sales tax funded. So there's no federal funds or anything, it's all just sales tax funded.
How often is it that, like, the DOT can have political pressure to do a project in a different order than originally agreed to? Is that pretty common, or is there a pretty good understanding?
No,
of
the
sequencing
legislature
of it?
has put some constraints on ADOT on their projects, but we have statutory authority to do our plan and our program, so we retain the right to kind of schedule our projects.
Okay.
So our region, we work with everyone. We work with our member jurisdictions, the state DOT, us, and we've sat down in this. We laid out all those projects. It was mainly what needs to go first. One thing when we talked, and I forgot I did mention in the case study, the reason they're building that 155th Avenue interchange is when they take apart and rebuild that 6303 interchange, those folks have to have somewhere to go. Because they're gonna have to reroute them somewhere. So, to do a full system TI, you have to have a reliever interchange, and that's what that will be.
Okay.
So yeah, we do a lot of that of like, you can't build this, you can't have these two projects under construction at the same time because one is the reliever for the other road, so you don't want to hose them.
Yeah.
A lot of foresight in that. So far it's worked out pretty well.
Any additional questions?
I can just keep going, but I don't want to speak over people. We were talking about at lunch how in the state of Idaho you can do impact fees. The Ada County Highway District, that's a notable source of revenue for them. With it being a bunch of locals, one, can you do impact fees in Arizona? Two, do any of the locals rely on that for the arterial system, or is that not really a common practice?
So they do a lot of developer fees within the local jurisdiction to
Yeah.
build, like improvements around a specific site. But there aren't like where they're doing statewide impact fees that we get. Pretty much the state ADOT's funding comes from the Highway User Revenue Fund and federal funds.
Yeah.
That's all they have. There's nothing else.
No property tax.
No. We have property taxes, but they're not used for transportation. Mainly in Arizona, a lot of property taxes are for education. Yeah, so now local jurisdictions may do that, but it's part of their general fund and their local funds. So it may be the funds they do as a matching fund to a project, but it's not a source of funds that we use or rely on or count.
Yeah.
Cool.
So here's just an overall question.
Sure.
Your exploding growth is coming with, should be coming with a bunch of exploding money. Is it going well with the roads, or is it disjointed?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the one thing, when we did the first revenue update in January 2025, numbers were good. It was 49 billion. We had shown market growth over the original 28 billion. Construction was faster. And so that's been the challenge for us is the cost of implementing the plan from a construction side was outpacing the growth in revenues. It's tailed off now. It's actually come back closer to reality. And maybe I'm missing your question.
Well, I know it's recession, so people aren't spending as much, so therefore you're not.
Our sales tax collections so far are actually trending right along the forecast. So far, we have not, it's been weird, but it has been very resilient to so far, like global pressures or other things going on, tariffs and other things. We haven't seen a market change in what our forecasts were, which were developed before some of these things were implemented, versus the actual collections. They're still trending very within a few tenths of a %. So far, so good.
So in '86, who initiated the original sales tax? Because it sounds like it's a lot easier to extend it, and you guys, I get, can't advocate for, but can provide education on those types of things. Did MAG initiate it? Was it a local activist?
I think it was a lot more of the local agencies coming together and saying, hey, if we don't do something, it's not going to get done, because if we realize, the state just didn't have the fiscal wherewithal, and they're trying to do the entire state. I think it was a realization, if we don't come up with another solution, we're gonna have that same freeway network for an extended period of time. So their solution was, and I have to go back and dig out history books, it was prior to my time even in government. But yeah, they just realized, I think it was realization, we have to do something. If we want to be, and I think a lot of it was looking at economic growth. Hey, if we want to develop the valley and grow, we have to have a transportation system. Well, if the state can't build it, who can? Oh, well, if we do a half-cent sales tax, we can, and they did it. They built that original loop system on that half-cent sales tax. So, and then they proved it worked. And so, and to your point, easier to continue a thing you have. I mean, you still have to show value. It was 60-40 because we could show them we're still delivering what we said we would do. So, have some faith and trust in us.
Just sort of context. I know Curtis and I have talked about economic development districts. We don't currently have one here. But also I know Amy and I have chatted about some of our plans that are the best at, we identified these projects, you look at it 10 years later, what projects were done. Our freight study was killer. It's hard to find a project that hasn't been completed. You look at some of the other ones we've done, and it's a little bit harder to find how much progress has been made. So just, thinking how to make that sales pitch, I think from that economic freight support, you'd mentioned the TTI, I think similar environments, those might resonate a little bit better here. So I thought that was good information. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've shown that, if you build it, growth comes with it. And to your point, studies, we do two types of studies. We do very high level geographic studies of a component of the valley. We're doing a bunch right now. We're doing the Northeast Valley. It's very much a 50,000 foot level. Here's growth projections, here's travel projections, here's all of these things, a lot of socioeconomic data. We look at all of that and we say, if you see build out looking like this, you're going to need these levels of improvements. But it isn't saying you must build this here now. It's more of a, here's the range of options you want to look at.
Yeah.
And then, it gives them kind of an implementation strategy. Whereas we have other studies, like you saw with the 303s, very intentional about, we have a specific near-term problem we're trying to solve. And so it leads much more it's almost like doing a design concept report. You're doing a DCR, oh, hey, we really are gonna kind of figure out what we need to do soon. Yeah, so we do both kinds of studies. We do more fun planning level studies and much more almost like project level studies. Awesome.